The moment I realized my marriage was built on lies didn't come with shouting or smashed plates. It came quietly, with a half-empty bottle rolling out from under the passenger seat of my husband's car and tapping against my shoe. At first, I didn't even understand what I was looking at. Then the label sank in, my stomach tightened, and a cold, heavy silence filled my chest. That tiny object was the start of a chain of events I never imagined would end with flashing lights, sirens, and firefighters standing in my living room, trying not to make eye contact with anyone. My husband, Marcus, had always been smooth with words. The kind of man who could explain away anything with a smile and a joke. Late nights at work, sudden business trips, his phone always face down on the table. I had asked questions before, gentle ones at first, then sharper ones. Each time, he laughed it off, kissed my forehead, and told me I was worrying too much. I wanted to believe him. I really did. We had built a life together, shared routines, shared dreams, shared bills and memories. You don't throw that away easily. But doubt has a way of growing when you try to ignore it. It creeps into quiet moments, into the space between breaths. I started noticing little things. The way he showered the second he came home. The new clothes he never wore around me. The sudden interest in his appearance, the gym sessions that didn't match his energy level. And then there was that bottle. Something he never needed at home. Something that didn't belong in our car. I didn't confront him right away. Instead, I watched. I listened. I paid attention. And the truth slowly revealed itself in pieces. A text message that popped up on his phone while he was in the shower. A name I didn't recognize, followed by a heart emoji. A rushed call he took outside, his voice low and careful. My heart broke quietly, again and again, until the pain turned into something else. Something heavier. Something darker. I'm not proud of what I felt next. It wasn't just sadness. It was anger, sharp and hot. Anger at the lies, at the disrespect, at the way he made me feel small and foolish in my own home. I replayed our conversations in my head, every time he told me I was imagining things. Every time he made me doubt myself. And as much as I hated it, a part of me wanted him to feel even a fraction of that humiliation. Revenge isn't something you plan when you're calm. It grows in the middle of sleepless nights, when the house is quiet and your thoughts won't stop. I told myself I just wanted the truth. I told myself I wanted closure. But deep down, I wanted him exposed. I wanted the mask to slip just once, so I wouldn't be the only one carrying this secret pain. The opportunity came on an ordinary afternoon. Marcus was rushing out the door, phone buzzing nonstop, excuses spilling out of his mouth. He kissed my cheek without looking at me and told me he'd be late again. I watched him leave, my heart pounding, my mind racing. I walked into the bathroom, my hands trembling, and stared at the counter where everything was neatly lined up. That familiar bottle sat there, mocking me, like proof of everything I didn't want to believe. I told myself to stop. I told myself to walk away. But anger has a loud voice when you've been quiet for too long. I made a choice in that moment, one that would change everything. I didn't think about consequences. I didn't imagine how far it would go. I just wanted to do something, anything that would break the spell he had me under. What happened next wasn't some carefully crafted plan. It was impulsive, messy, and fueled by heartbreak. I never imagined it would turn into a nightmare of embarrassment and panic. I never imagined that hours later, I'd be standing frozen in shock, listening to sirens outside, while neighbors peeked through their curtains. I never imagined emergency responders would be involved in my marriage drama. When Marcus finally came home, the air between us felt different. Heavy. Charged. He barely looked at me, moving through the house like a stranger. I could tell something was wrong, but I didn't ask. My heart was beating too fast, my palms sweating as I waited. Every second stretched painfully, like time itself was holding its breath. Then it happened. A sound from the bedroom that wasn't laughter or music or anything familiar. It was panic. Confusion. His voice, raised in a way I had never heard before, calling my name. The walls of the house seemed to close in on me as reality crashed down. This wasn't a joke anymore. This wasn't just anger. This was real, and it was spiraling out of control. I stood there, my mind racing, torn between fear and a strange sense of grim satisfaction.
Part of me wanted to help immediately.
Another part of me remembered every lie, every late night, every time he made me feel crazy. My hands shook as I walked toward the bedroom door, my heart pounding so loudly I could hear it in my ears. What I saw inside changed everything. The situation had gone far beyond what I imagined. His face wasn't smug or confident anymore. It was pale, eyes wide with panic. In that moment, I realized I wasn't in control at all. Whatever lesson I thought I was teaching had turned into something much bigger, something dangerous, something impossible to undo. The phone call to emergency services felt surreal, like it was happening to someone else. I could barely get the words out, my voice cracking as I explained that we needed help.
Fast.
Minutes later, red and blue lights flooded our street, reflecting off windows, drawing attention we could never take back. Whispers spread before the truck even stopped. As boots hit the floor and professionals took over, I stepped back, my emotions colliding inside me.
Shame.
Anger.
Fear.
A deep, aching sadness for the marriage that was clearly over, no matter how this ended. I watched strangers step into our most private mess, knowing there was no turning back now. And as they worked, as the tension in the room grew thicker with every passing second, one terrifying thought echoed in my mind. When this was finally over, when the embarrassment faded and the sirens disappeared, what would be left of us? Because some mistakes don't just expose the truth. They burn everything down around it. After the firefighters arrived and took control of the room, time seemed to slow down in a strange, unreal way. I sat on the edge of the couch, my hands clasped together so tightly my fingers ached. The house smelled faintly of smoke from their equipment and something sharper, like panic itself. Marcus wouldn't look at me. He kept his eyes on the ceiling, breathing too fast, his confident image completely gone. Seeing him like that brought back memories of the man I first fell in love with, and for a split second, my anger softened into something painful and confusing. We hadn't always been like this. When I met Marcus, he was charming but kind, the type of man who made you feel seen in a crowded room. He remembered small details, like how I took my coffee or the song that made me cry every time it played. Our early years were full of laughter, late-night talks, and plans for the future. We dreamed about traveling, about growing old together, about building a home that felt safe. I never imagined trust would become the one thing we couldn't fix. The change didn't happen overnight. It came slowly, wrapped in excuses and distance. After his promotion, everything shifted. More hours at work, more stress, less time for us. I told myself it was normal, that marriages go through phases. I worked harder to keep things together, cooking his favorite meals, adjusting my schedule, ignoring the lonely feeling that followed me around the house. I thought love meant endurance. I thought patience would be rewarded. Looking back, the signs were there long before that day. There were moments when he seemed distracted, like his mind was somewhere else even when he was sitting right next to me. There were arguments that went nowhere, conversations that ended with silence instead of understanding. I started questioning myself more than him, wondering if I was the one failing, the one not enough. That kind of doubt eats at you quietly, changing the way you see yourself. As the firefighters spoke in low, professional voices behind me, my mind kept drifting back to the first time I felt truly suspicious. It was a dinner party at a friend's house. Marcus spent most of the night texting, smiling at his phone. When I asked who it was, he said it was work, but his tone didn't match his words. Later that night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, listening to his steady breathing, feeling like a stranger in my own bed. The tension in the house now felt like an extension of all those unspoken moments. The firefighters were calm, methodical, clearly trained for emergencies, but this situation was different. I could sense their discomfort, the way they avoided unnecessary conversation. It made everything feel heavier, more exposed. Our private problems were no longer private. They were unfolding in front of people who would remember this call long after they left. One of them asked me a few simple questions, his voice neutral, his eyes kind but tired. I answered automatically, barely processing my own words. In my head, I kept replaying the choices that led us here. The lies. The anger. The moment I decided to stop being silent. I wondered if things would have turned out differently if I had confronted Marcus earlier, if I had demanded honesty instead of swallowing my pain. Marcus finally spoke, his voice strained, asking how long this would take. There was fear in his eyes now, not just physical discomfort, but something deeper. Fear of being seen for who he really was. Fear of consequences he could no longer avoid. For the first time, I realized he might be as lost as I was. That realization didn't excuse what he had done, but it complicated my emotions in a way I wasn't prepared for. As they worked, memories continued to surface, moments I had buried under routine and denial. The anniversary he forgot. The weekend trips that were always canceled at the last minute. The way he grew defensive whenever I mentioned feeling disconnected. I saw those moments clearly now, like pieces of a puzzle finally coming together. The truth was no longer something I could ignore or soften. It was right there, undeniable. Outside, I could hear neighbors murmuring, their curiosity buzzing like static through the walls. The thought of facing them later made my stomach twist. This wasn't just about a cheating husband anymore. It was about humiliation, about being the subject of whispered conversations and judgmental glances. I felt exposed, raw, like every mistake and every secret had been dragged into the open. Yet, beneath the fear and shame, there was another feeling growing. A quiet determination. I realized I had spent too long shrinking myself to keep the peace. Too long accepting half-truths because I was afraid of being alone. Watching Marcus now, stripped of his confidence and control, I understood that silence had protected him, not me. Whatever happened next, I knew I couldn't go back to pretending everything was fine. The firefighters exchanged a look, one of them stepping aside to make a call. Their professionalism never wavered, but the situation was clearly complicated. I hugged my arms around myself, feeling the weight of the moment settle in my chest. This was a turning point whether I liked it or not. The life I knew was cracking open, revealing truths I had tried so hard to avoid. Marcus finally met my eyes, and in that glance, there was a mix of regret, fear, and something that almost looked like apology. He opened his mouth as if to speak, then closed it again. There were so many things he could have said, so many questions hanging in the air between us. Who was she? How long had it been going on? Did any of it mean anything to him? But this wasn't the time or place for answers. As the minutes dragged on, the tension thickened. Every sound felt louder, every movement sharper. I could sense that whatever the firefighters decided to do next would change the course of this night, and possibly our lives. I wasn't ready for resolution. I wasn't ready for forgiveness or confrontation. All I knew was that the truth, once uncovered, refuses to stay quiet. Standing there in our living room, surrounded by strangers and broken trust, I realized this wasn't just a story about betrayal. It was about the moment you stop running from reality, even when it scares you. And as the firefighters prepared for their next step, my heart raced with one unanswered question. When this was finally over, would I recognize the person I'd become, or the man I thought I married? The firefighters continued working carefully, speaking in hushed tones that carried more weight than shouting ever could. Every few seconds, one of them glanced in my direction, as if trying to read my reaction. I kept my face still, but inside, my thoughts were crashing into each other. This moment felt stretched, suspended between what had already happened and what was still coming. Nothing was settled. Nothing was forgiven. It was like standing on the edge of something you know will change you, even if you don't know how yet. As I watched them, I thought about how easily things fall apart when trust is gone. Marriage isn't just about love. It's about belief. Believing that the person next to you won't make you feel foolish for trusting them. Believing that home is a safe place. Somewhere along the way, that belief had cracked, and now it was completely shattered. The emergency scene unfolding in front of me was just the physical proof of something that had been breaking quietly for months. Marcus shifted uncomfortably, his jaw clenched tight. I could tell he wanted to say something, maybe explain himself, maybe ask for help in a different way. But fear kept him silent. I wondered if this was how I had looked all those times. I sensed something was wrong, but didn't speak up. Frozen. Afraid of what the truth might cost me. The thought made my chest ache. One of the firefighters asked Marcus a question, and his voice shook as he answered. That sound hit me harder than I expected. I had always seen him as confident, almost untouchable. Seeing him stripped of that control was unsettling. It reminded me that people don't just become villains overnight. They make choices, one small step at a time, until they're standing in a place they never planned to be. My phone buzzed in my pocket, pulling me back to the present. A message from my sister, asking if everything was okay. I stared at the screen, unsure how to respond. How do you explain something like this without sounding unreal? I typed and deleted several replies before finally putting the phone away. This was too big to share through a screen, too raw to explain with words. As the night dragged on, fragments of the past kept surfacing. I remembered the first argument where he accused me of being paranoid. The way his words made me doubt my own instincts. That memory burned now, sharper than ever. I realized how often people are taught to ignore their gut feelings, especially in relationships.
To be understanding.
To be patient. To not make a fuss. That silence can become a prison. Outside, the sound of voices grew louder. I could imagine neighbors whispering, speculating, turning our pain into entertainment. The thought made my skin crawl. This wasn't a dramatic story to me. It was my life unraveling in real time. I wondered how many of them smiled at us before, unaware of the tension hiding behind closed doors. Or maybe they had noticed more than I thought. One firefighter stepped aside and spoke quietly into his radio. The seriousness in his posture made my stomach twist. Whatever decision was coming next didn't feel small. I hugged my arms tighter around myself, trying to ground my breathing. I felt caught between guilt and anger. Guilt for how things had escalated. Anger for being pushed to this breaking point. Marcus finally broke the silence between us. He whispered my name, not loudly enough for anyone else to hear. I looked at him, really looked, and searched for the man I married. The one who promised honesty. The one who said we were a team. Instead, I saw someone afraid of consequences, someone who had underestimated how deeply his actions would cut. I didn't respond. I didn't trust my voice not to shake. In that quiet exchange, another truth surfaced. This wasn't just about infidelity. It was about power. About who gets to lie and who is expected to forgive. About how easily someone can rewrite reality if the other person stays silent long enough. That realization made me feel stronger and weaker at the same time. The firefighters continued their work, careful and focused, but the tension in the room never eased. Each minute felt heavier than the last. I could sense that whatever happened next would force conversations we had avoided for far too long. Questions about honesty, accountability, and whether love can survive betrayal. None of those answers were ready yet, and that uncertainty sat between us like a third presence. My mind wandered to the future, not in clear images, but in fragments. A house that no longer felt like home. Awkward explanations. Long nights alone with my thoughts. I didn't know if there was a version of this story where we stayed together. I didn't even know if I wanted that anymore. What I did know was that I could never go back to the version of myself who ignored the truth to keep the peace. As the emergency scene continued, I felt the weight of being watched, judged, and misunderstood. But beneath all of that, there was a quiet clarity forming. Whatever the outcome, this moment had exposed everything we tried to hide. The lies. The resentment. The fragile foundation we pretended was solid. The firefighters paused again, exchanging another look, and I sensed the night was far from over. The hardest conversations were still ahead. The truth was still unfolding. And as I stood there, caught between past and future, one thing was painfully clear. Some betrayals don't just break trust. They force you to finally face who you are and what you're willing to accept, no matter how uncomfortable the consequences may be. The room felt smaller as the firefighters gathered closer, their voices dropping even lower. One of them explained something to Marcus in a calm, steady tone, but I couldn't hear the words clearly. I only saw the way Marcus's face changed, the color draining as reality settled in. Whatever they were telling him wasn't simple, and it wasn't quick. My heart pounded harder, each beat echoing in my ears like a warning. I stayed where I was, afraid that if I moved, everything would tip over. The couch beneath me felt unfamiliar, like it belonged to someone else's house. I noticed small details I had never paid attention to before: a crack in the wall, a photo frame slightly crooked, dust on the shelf we always forgot to clean. Ordinary things that suddenly felt heavy with meaning. This was the life we built, and it was trembling. One of the firefighters asked me to step closer, just in case they needed to speak with me directly. My legs felt stiff as I stood up. As I moved toward the bedroom doorway, I felt the weight of Marcus's gaze on me. There was something in his eyes now that I hadn't seen before. Not anger, not confidence. It was desperation. And it scared me more than yelling ever could. Standing there, I could hear his uneven breathing, see the tension in his shoulders. For a brief moment, I felt the urge to reach out, to comfort him the way I had done so many times before. But then the memories rushed back. The lies, the secrets, the nights I cried quietly so he wouldn't hear. I pulled my hand back, folding my arms instead. Some lines, once crossed, can't be stepped over again so easily. The firefighters began preparing for the next step, moving equipment carefully, discussing options in clipped, professional language. Their calmness felt almost surreal compared to the chaos in my head. I wondered how many strange situations they had seen, how many broken families, how many moments that changed lives forever. To them, this might be another call. To me, it was the collapse of everything I thought I knew. My phone buzzed again, this time with a call from Marcus's mother. I stared at the screen, my throat tightening. How did she already know? Word travels fast when sirens light up a quiet street. I let the call ring out, unable to face her questions, her disappointment, or her defense of her son. That conversation would come later, I knew, along with many others I wasn't ready for. Marcus shifted again, wincing, his voice tight as he asked if there was any other way. The firefighter answered honestly, not unkindly, but firmly. I couldn't hear everything, but the seriousness was clear. This wasn't something that could be undone with apologies or excuses. It required action, patience, and consequences. The same things our marriage had been missing for a long time. As I watched, a strange calm settled over me. Not peace, but clarity. I realized I wasn't just witnessing a crisis. I was standing at a crossroads. Every choice from this moment forward would shape my future. Whether I stayed or left. Whether I spoke my truth or stayed silent. Whether I allowed fear to guide me or finally listened to myself. The house creaked softly as someone shifted their weight. Outside, the night felt alive with curiosity and judgment. I imagined faces pressed to windows, phones lifted discreetly, stories already forming in people's minds. I hated that part of it, the loss of privacy, the way betrayal often comes with public humiliation. But hiding hadn't protected me before. Maybe facing the truth, no matter how uncomfortable, was the only way forward. One of the firefighters looked at me and gently asked if I was okay. The question caught me off guard. I nodded automatically, even though I wasn't sure what okay meant anymore. I felt everything at once. Sadness for what we had lost, anger for what he had done, fear of what was coming next. Beneath it all, there was a quiet strength I didn't recognize at first, but it was there. Marcus spoke again, his voice cracking as he tried to explain himself. His words tumbled over each other, half-finished thoughts, apologies that felt too late. I listened, but I didn't respond. This wasn't the moment for explanations. This was the moment where actions mattered more than words. Where the truth stood exposed, unable to hide behind charm or excuses. The firefighters paused, exchanging another look that made my stomach drop. One of them reached for a tool, the metallic sound echoing too loudly in the room. My heart raced as I realized they were about to try something new, something riskier. The tension thickened, wrapping around all of us like a tight knot. I took a step back, my hands trembling slightly now. The air felt heavy, charged with anticipation. I could sense that we were approaching the point of no return. Whatever happened in the next few minutes would define this night forever. Would it bring relief, or make everything worse? No one could say for sure. Marcus closed his eyes, taking a shaky breath. For the first time, he looked truly vulnerable. Not the confident man who brushed off my concerns, not the distant husband glued to his phone, but someone facing the consequences of his choices head-on. Seeing that didn't erase my pain, but it made the moment feel painfully real. As the firefighters positioned themselves and prepared to act, I felt my chest tighten. This was it. The moment everything had been building toward. The lies, the betrayal, the silence, all leading to this tense, unbearable pause. I held my breath, knowing that once this step was taken, there would be no going back. And as the room fell into a heavy, expectant silence, one thought echoed louder than any siren ever could. After tonight, nothing between us would ever be the same again. Just as the firefighters were about to move, a sharp knock echoed through the house, loud enough to cut through the tension like a blade. Everyone froze. One of the firefighters looked toward the front door, then back at Marcus, confusion flickering across his face. My heart skipped. We weren't expecting anyone else. The night had already gone too far. Whatever this was, it felt like another crack opening beneath our feet. The knock came again, firmer this time. A firefighter stepped away to answer it, and the front door creaked open. Cold air rushed in, carrying the low murmur of voices from outside. I stood still, my pulse racing, trying to prepare myself for whatever new twist was coming. When the firefighter called Marcus's name from the doorway, my stomach dropped. A woman's voice followed, tight and anxious. She said his name again, louder this time, as if afraid he wouldn't answer. I didn't need to see her face to know what this meant. The room seemed to tilt. This wasn't just about suspicion anymore. This was confirmation, standing right on our doorstep. Marcus's eyes widened, panic flashing across his face. He tried to speak, then stopped, swallowing hard. The firefighter at the door stepped aside, and there she was. Younger than me, well-dressed. Her expression shifted from concern to shock the moment she took in the scene. The uniforms, the equipment, the heavy silence. And then her eyes landed on me. For a brief moment, we just stared at each other. No words, no explanations. Just two women connected by the same man and the same betrayal. I saw recognition dawn in her eyes, followed quickly by embarrassment and fear. She hadn't expected this. None of us had. She started to say something, maybe an apology, maybe an excuse, but the words fell apart before they left her mouth. One of the firefighters gently asked her to step outside, his voice calm but firm. She hesitated, glancing back at Marcus, who looked like he wanted the floor to swallow him whole. That single glance told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a one-time lapse. This was a double life. As the door closed behind her, the air in the room felt heavier than ever. The truth had expanded, filling every corner of the house. This wasn't just infidelity, it was deception layered on deception. I felt something inside me harden. A line I didn't even realize I was standing near had been crossed. Marcus finally tried to explain, his voice cracking as he said my name. I raised my hand slightly, stopping him. I couldn't listen, not now. Every word felt meaningless compared to what had just happened. The second plot twist wasn't dramatic shouting or a confession. It was the quiet realization that the man I married had been living a life I knew nothing about. The firefighters regrouped, their focus returning to the task at hand, but the energy in the room had changed. There was urgency now, mixed with an unspoken understanding that this situation had grown far beyond uncomfortable. One of them explained that what they were about to do would take time and cooperation. No guarantees, no shortcuts. The same words echoed in my mind, painfully familiar. Outside, Voices rose again. I could hear the woman arguing softly, her tone pleading, confused. Neighbors shifted closer. The scene was turning into something impossible to hide. I felt exposed in a way I never had before, like my private pain had become public property. But alongside that vulnerability, there was a strange sense of relief. The truth was out. It was messy and humiliating, but it was real. Marcus avoided my eyes now. The silence between us was louder than any argument we'd ever had. I wondered how long he thought he could keep this hidden. How long he expected me to play the role of the trusting wife while he built something else on the side. That question burned inside me, unanswered, but undeniable. As the firefighters prepared to act again, one of them quietly warned that things might get more complicated before they got better. His words felt like a summary of my entire marriage.
Complicated. Delayed.
Avoided. I nodded, even though my throat felt too tight to speak. The second plot twist didn't just raise the stakes, it changed everything. This was no longer about catching a cheating husband or confronting a painful secret. It was about facing the full scale of betrayal and deciding what kind of person I would be on the other side of it. Victim or survivor. Silent or honest. I stepped back, giving the firefighters room, my hands trembling but my resolve growing steadier. Whatever happened next would push this story to its breaking point. The lies had collided, the truth had arrived uninvited, and there was no way to contain the fallout anymore. As the room fell quiet again, and the firefighters signaled they were ready, I took a deep breath. The climax was close. I could feel it in the charged air, in the way everyone held still, waiting. And with every second that passed, one thing became clearer than ever. When this night finally reached its peak, nothing, not my marriage, not my life, not the people involved, would come out unchanged. The firefighters finally moved in, their actions careful but decisive. The room fell silent except for the low hum of their equipment and Marcus's uneven breathing. Every eye was focused on what they were doing, but my mind was racing ahead, bracing for the outcome. This was the moment everything had been building toward, the point where fear, betrayal, and truth collided. After what felt like forever, one of the firefighters stepped back and nodded to his team. There was a subtle shift in the room, a release of tension that made my knees feel weak. Marcus let out a shaky breath, his face pale and damp with sweat. The immediate crisis was over. The danger had passed. Relief washed through the room in a quiet wave, followed quickly by exhaustion. Marcus was helped to sit upright, wrapped in a blanket, no longer the confident man who walked out of the house earlier that day. He looked small, embarrassed, and broken. Paramedics checked him over, asking routine questions, their voices calm and professional. The chaos had settled, but the emotional wreckage was just beginning. As the firefighters packed up their equipment, one of them gently explained that they would need to document everything. Reports. Statements. More people involved than either of us had expected. The consequences were real now, official, and impossible to ignore. This wasn't something we could laugh off or bury under apologies. Marcus finally looked at me, really looked at me, and spoke my name with a crack in his voice. He apologized, not with excuses this time, but with a heavy, defeated honesty. He admitted to the affair. Admitted it had been going on longer than he'd ever let on. Admitted he never thought he'd get caught this way. Hearing the truth hurt, but it also brought a strange sense of clarity. The questions that haunted me finally had answers, even if I didn't like them. I told him I already knew. About the lies. About the double life. About the woman who showed up at our door. My voice didn't shake the way I expected it to. It felt steady, grounded, like I had finally stepped into my own truth. I told him that whatever we had was broken long before tonight. This was just the moment it became visible to everyone else. The other woman was asked to leave, her involvement documented, and her presence no longer needed. She didn't look at me when she passed, her face tight with shame and shock. I didn't chase her for answers or explanations. She was just another part of a story that no longer defined me. As the emergency crew prepared to leave, one firefighter paused beside me and quietly said something I didn't expect. He told me that situations like this often reveal more than just one secret. His words lingered in my mind, confusing and unsettling. I didn't ask him what he meant. I was too drained, too focused on what I already knew. Once the house was finally quiet again, Marcus asked if we could talk. I agreed, but only because I needed to say my piece. We sat across from each other in the living room, the space between us feeling wider than ever. He talked about regret, about mistakes, about wanting to fix things. I listened, but something inside me had shifted. I wasn't angry anymore. I was done. Then came the final twist, the one that even I hadn't seen coming. As Marcus reached for his phone to call someone for support, a notification lit up the screen. A message preview, clear as day, revealing yet another name. Another secret. Another lie. The room felt cold all over again. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just stood up, grabbed my keys, and told him I was leaving. Not for the night. Not to cool off. But for good. The realization hit him harder than any siren ever could. His face crumpled as he understood that this time, there was no fixing it. I walked out of the house that night knowing the climax wasn't just the emergency or the exposure. It was the moment I chose myself. The unexpected twist wasn't another betrayal. It was my decision to stop accepting one. And as I stepped into the quiet darkness outside, I knew the story wasn't ending with him at all. It was finally beginning with me. The night air felt cooler when I stepped outside, like the world was trying to calm me down after everything that had exploded inside those walls. I stood for a moment on the porch, listening to the distant hum of traffic and the faint voices of neighbors finally drifting back into their homes. The flashing lights were gone now, and with them, the chaos. What remained was the quiet truth I could no longer run from. I wasn't walking away in anger. I was walking away in clarity. I drove to my sister's place without turning on the radio. Silence felt necessary. My hands were steady on the wheel, even though my heart was still heavy. Somewhere between the house and the highway, I realized I wasn't replaying the scene over and over anymore. I wasn't wondering what I could have done differently. For the first time in a long while, my thoughts were focused on what came next, not what went wrong. My sister didn't ask questions when she opened the door. She just hugged me, long and tight, the way you do when words aren't enough. That night, I slept deeper than I had in months. No tossing, no anxious thoughts chasing each other in the dark. Just rest. It felt like my body finally understood that the worst had already happened, and I had survived it. In the days that followed, reality settled in piece by piece. Marcus sent messages at first. Apologies. Promises. Long explanations that came too late. I didn't respond. Not because I hated him, but because I knew engaging would pull me back into a cycle I had finally stepped out of. Some conversations don't bring closure. They just reopen wounds. The truth about his double life surfaced quickly. Mutual friends reached out, some confused, some supportive, others silent. I learned that secrets rarely stay hidden for long. The affair, the lies, the image he worked so hard to protect, it all unraveled on its own. I didn't have to expose him. His choices did that for me. One afternoon, I returned to the house with my sister to collect my things. Walking through those rooms felt strange, like visiting a place that no longer belonged to me. The photos on the walls, the furniture we picked out together, the small routines that once felt permanent, all of it now felt like a chapter that had ended. I didn't feel sad the way I expected. Mostly, I felt free. Marcus wasn't home when we packed my boxes, which was probably for the best. I didn't need another emotional scene. I didn't need explanations or tears. What I needed was space to rebuild. As I carried the last box to the car, I paused and took one final look at the house. I thanked it silently for the good memories, then let it go. Weeks passed, and life slowly found a new rhythm. I focused on work, on friendships I had neglected, on simple things like morning walks and quiet dinners. Healing didn't happen all at once. Some days were easier than others. There were moments when anger resurfaced, when embarrassment crept in, when I wondered how I hadn't seen the truth sooner. But those moments didn't control me anymore. They passed just like everything else. I learned something important during that time. Betrayal doesn't just break trust with someone else, it can fracture your trust in yourself. Rebuilding that inner confidence became my real work. I started listening to my instincts again. I stopped apologizing for asking questions. I stopped minimizing my feelings to keep others comfortable. As for the woman who showed up that night, I never heard from her again. I didn't need to. She was part of a story I had already closed. I chose not to carry resentment toward her. Anger takes energy, and I wanted to spend mine on healing, not bitterness. The firefighters became an unexpected symbol for me. Not because of the chaos, but because of what they represented. When something dangerous happens, you call for help. You don't hide it. You don't pretend it's fine. That night taught me that emotional emergencies deserve the same honesty and urgency. Ignoring the warning signs doesn't prevent the fire. It just makes it harder to put out. Eventually, the legal side of things was handled. The marriage ended quietly, without drama. Papers signed. Lives separated. It wasn't the ending I once imagined, but it was the one I needed. I didn't feel like I failed. I felt like I chose myself when it mattered most. Looking back now, I understand that the real climax wasn't the emergency or the exposure. It was the moment I stopped doubting my worth. The moment I realized love shouldn't make you feel small, confused, or invisible. A healthy relationship doesn't require constant forgiveness for repeated betrayal. It requires honesty, respect, and effort from both sides. People often ask if I regret anything. I don't. Not the love I gave, not the trust one offered, and not the choice I made to leave. Every experience, even the painful ones, taught me something valuable. I learned that strength doesn't always look loud or dramatic. Sometimes it looks like packing a bag, closing a door, and walking into an uncertain future with your head held high. If there's one takeaway from my story, it's this: pay attention to your instincts. When something feels off, it usually is. You deserve clarity, not confusion. You deserve loyalty, not excuses. And you deserve a life that feels peaceful, not one that keeps you on edge. Today, my life is quieter, steadier, and more honest. I laugh more. I sleep better. I trust myself again. The past no longer defines me. It informs me. And while that night will always be a part of my story, it's not the ending. It was the turning point that led me back to myself. Sometimes, the most unexpected moments force us to confront hard truths. Sometimes, the most painful endings make room for stronger beginnings. And sometimes, walking away isn't giving up, it's choosing a future where you finally come first.